Are we documenting the things that we participate in so that someone coming behind us can find it? I mean, it's nice if we have all this information on people 4 or 5 generations ago, but we don't put down something about ourselves. We're leaving a gap that someone else may have to put in a lot of time to find, and with those of us who have already searched know that it can be time consuming. So I'm going to suggest, in addition to making sure that you can pass stuff down to your descendants about your ancestors, that there's something in there about you that makes it easy for them. One of the things I'm going to ask, Frank has been doing some work in the Meadowlands, and it's I grew up in Pennsylvania, found out about the Meadowlands when I started working up there, and Frank has done some research on things that has happened there, and I asked him to give us a brief presentation, enough to whet your appetite, and then come back and give us a more detailed presentation in the fall. So at this point in time, Frank,
thank you so much. I'm very, very honored and grateful that you've asked me to be here today and to be part of this very, very important organization. And just for those of you who don't know me, I dedicate my time, and I have since I was in my teens, to understanding and fostering education in Black history. And I do this in memory of my best friend that I grew up with, Michelle Darrell, whose mother and my mother went to Barringer High School and college together in Newark. And Dr. Darrell became one of the head clinical site. She was the first woman, the first Black woman to be the head of Bellevue Hospital. And unfortunately, Michelle went to Michelle went to Lac-Adair and Montclair. We're all from Montclair. And Kimberly, and she went to MK with me, and then she passed away when she was 17. And she was very privileged as a child because she spent summers in Martha's Vineyard because her mother rented with the King family, with Martin King and his family. My family's always been involved with civil rights. My grandmother's cousin was Peter Rodino, who was always like the founding board, amongst the founding board members of NAACP chapters in New Jersey. So this has always been something. Now, my mother was one of the founders of the Meadowlands Museum, and then I was a trustee. And going through the maps to do an exhibition, I was wondering, why do all the maps say New Barbados in the Meadowlands? Now, do any of you know this? All right. A lot of people don't know this, but in the 1600s until maybe 1800, after that even, the Meadowlands of New Jersey was called New Barbados, and on the maps it's all trees. And I was curious, and even my mother didn't know. So nobody knew, and I was asked to give a lecture at the Meadowlands Environmental Center on the maps, and I asked them, they didn't know, so nobody knew. So I did my own historical research, and the history is just horrifying. And in my mission of promoting and fostering Black history, I feel it's a social responsibility of mine to just continue this research, so I'm doing a book about it. The New Jersey Meadowlands were all subdivided into plantations, and they were slave-driven plantations, and the owners were from Barbados. And because slave trade was dying in the Caribbean at that time, in the 1600s, they moved their businesses up to the port of New York. Now, New York dropped out of slave trade much sooner than New Jersey, but New Jersey kept it until even they say the 1800s, but I'm sure it was just like, today, yeah. So this is, now, another thing is that in researching my book, all of the history that we learned that's deposited in the historical archives in Trenton, New Jersey, is all written by slave owners. And, you know, the landed gentry of the time, like Van Winkle, we all just went to something that the Van Winkle, you know, was brought to light that he was selling freed black people to slavery, you know. So the history that we have has to be corrected because it's written in such a biased way that you cannot even teach it to children. And I feel betrayed, having had, I would say, the best education that you could possibly get, that's what I learned as a child, that's what my mother learned, that's what we all learned. History that was written by people who were just so biased and so racist that it all has to be corrected and put into perspective because we have to be responsible. Children cannot be taught this history anymore without adult supervision that would put it in a perspective, but we have to know what that perspective is. So, let's see. Governors Berkeley and Carteret, and we see their names everywhere in New Jersey, and those names have to be removed because they started New Jersey, they subdivided all the land as land grants for the king in the 1600s with the intention of creating a slave-driven economy. So if you wanted to purchase land from Governors Berkeley or Carteret, you were awarded 60 acres of free New Jersey land for every slave that you brought into New Jersey. So all of these people that were interested in setting up businesses in New Jersey would go up and down the coast of the United States picking up slaves that they had title to and bringing them to New Jersey so that they could get more land. And so this is East New Jersey. There was West New Jersey that was considered more peaceful because it was, you know, more Dutch or whatever, but it wasn't. Because let's say people were viciously engaging in slave trafficking in New Jersey, but they were also killing the native indigenous Lenape. So it was all very violent. We have such a violent, horrible history that it's all whitewashed in, you know, the history that we learn in our educational systems, but we have to understand that. We have to be able to correct that, or even we have to be able to explain that to children today. That was then and this is now, but, you know, it's not enough to just say that's over with, because it's really not until you deal with it. So, you know, it's just amazing. So the Meadowlands were a forest, and it was one of the biggest slave markets on the East Coast. Do you know that?
No.
Nobody does, because it's all been covered up, and we've been taught differently. You know, we've been taught that Sanford and the Kingslands and the Schuylers, you know, they were just wonderful founding fathers, but they were just slave owners who owned plantations. And then you would want to think that slavery in New Jersey died out because of moral reasons. Well, it didn't. It was because it was no longer economically viable, because there were white indentured servants that didn't have curfews, they didn't have laws against them, so it was much easier just to hire European indentured servants, so then they left all the blacks stranded in New Jersey. You know, they had no jobs, they couldn't be inserted. The population of Africans, like let's say at the time that they burned the Meadowlands down, was like 12,000 in Bergen County. That's a lot. You know, that's like a very big percent of the population. Now, they say that the sheriffs came and burned the forest down because of all the crime, and in the very, let's say, whitewashed history books,